So when you vote, you assume that the elected officials are going to come on and be honest and do everything they're supposed to do. And as a journalist, I also kind of would trust that media would find out if they were not doing everything proper. And what I realized and what I found out about the civil grand jury is there's a wide area in there that things could be happening that nobody really knows about. And here is an institution that looks into those areas.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Only in Santa Clara County, a podcast dedicated to democratizing the process of civic participation in local government. This podcast is produced by the Dreaming Collaborative, a civic nonprofit working at the intersection of culture, technology, and civic life to transform the practice of democracy in local government. My name is Alina Yin, and I will be your host. Welcome back, everyone, to part 4 of our special 5-part series on the Civil Grand Jury in Santa Clara County. Though they also do exist in all 58 counties in California by state mandate, the Civil Grand Jury here in Santa Clara County consists of 19 citizens who are volunteering from all over Santa Clara County for a 1-year term of public service. As a member of the panel, that's what they're called, they play a vital role in holding local government accountable, ensuring that public institutions operate fairly, transparently, and in the best interest of the people they serve. For those of you just joining us, I do suggest starting with episode 17 with the Honorable Judge Julie Emity for our Civil Grand Jury 101, and episode 18 with Brittany Heelbig, Deputy Manager to the Civil Grand Jury, where we take a deep dive into how the Civil Grand Jury works. In the previous episode, we started interviewing past jurors with lived experience. And so in episode 19, we had Dev Ghoshal, who talked about the power of public service. And now we are going to be talking about what to expect as a civil grand juror. Joining us is past juror Cecilia Deck. Cecilia is a retired journalism educator and former journalist who has lived in San Jose for 30 years. Now, before we get to our interview, at the time of this recording, the Superior Court of California, County of Santa Clara, is recruiting qualified applicants for the 2026-2027 Santa Clara County Civil Grand Jury. Applications are due March 27th, 2026 by 5 p.m. for the 1-year term commencing July 1st, 2026. Typically, their recruitment and application period is during the wintertime, and applications are usually due in March. So if you are so inspired and able to, I highly suggest you check out our show notes for resources, application links. You can read past reports and so much more. And now, on to our interview. Okay, so thank you so much for joining us. And before we get started, Cecilia, I would love for you to introduce yourself to listeners.
So I'm Cecilia Deck. I've been a resident of Santa Clara County, San Jose specifically, for about 30 years. And my work history was I was a newspaper reporter, and then I was a journalism professor. So newspaper reporter for about 10 years, journalism professor for about 25 years.
I feel like that's a really interesting kind of experience to go into the civil grand jury because you already have some of the public records research behind you. How did you hear about the civil grand jury and what made you decide to join?
I had read about it very many years ago, and it was in the back of my mind, kind of something I could do someday. And then after I retired in 2022, I saw an ad in the Mercury News. And so I'm a Mercury News reader and physical paper. And there it was. And oh, yeah, that's something I knew about years ago. And so that's what, and I kind of knew not exactly what it did, but that it was a institution that helped basically keep elected bodies honest. So I was interested in that.
That's awesome. I love that it was a newspaper ad. I still also read that section. And how would you describe, now after your service, how would you describe what the civil grand jury is and why it's important to people who may have never heard of it before?
So when you vote, you assume that the elected officials are going to come on and be honest and do everything they're supposed to do. And as a journalist, I also kind of would trust that media would find out if they were not doing everything proper. And what I realized and what I found out about the civil grand jury is there's a wide area in there that things could be happening that nobody really knows about. And here is an institution that looks into those areas. So that's what I became very interested in those questions.
And had you explored other areas of like community service and civic participation? How would you say this compares to that?
Years ago, I used to be an activist in the Democratic Party, actually. Um, Back in the day of landlines, I would go, and partly it was, I think, partly to get away from my kids. So I would go at night and I would go to a union hall or something and call people to vote. I remember calling people to vote even for Hillary Clinton, so as late as maybe 2015. But nowadays, there's no landlines and people don't want to get creepy calls. But okay, so I had been involved in the Democratic Party just to that small extent. And years and years before that, I had been a lot more involved. But as a journalist, you sign off of that. So for the years that I was a journalist, I was not doing civic participation in that way. Um, but yeah, I've always felt like a civic duty. I've always felt like you're part of the community, you owe something to the community. So also just having retired, I felt too busy the whole time I was a community college professor. I felt way too busy to do anything. So I was definitely actively looking for volunteer opportunities and something that kind of gives back to the community, something that would use my skills to do something good for the community.
And what would you say, what did you learn in doing this community service and being on the civil grand jury? Like, were there certain impressions or memorable moments that you had during your service?
Yeah, I mean, it just spans so many different areas, what I learned. So, learning, okay, almost every month, we had a guest speaker who came and talked about the city of Sunnyvale, the city of Gilroy, uh, the assessor's office, like all kinds of things. And I didn't mention before, but I'm actually Canadian, and most of my journalism career was in Michigan. So many things about California civics I wouldn't know except for voting or something. So learned a lot about, I think, I forget how many entities are covered by this Santa Clara County Civil Grand Jury, but it's huge. It's all the cities, the boards, education, everything. Yeah. So I learned a lot about all that. Uh, and then the guest speakers were almost all very interesting. And, so I learned that. But then actually working on cases, which I can't talk about, of course, but yeah, I did learn a lot, a lot.
How would you describe, I know, so you mentioned that you're Canadian and your journalism did cover local politics and at least, what was happening. How would you say what you knew about local government and how it worked before and then after the civil grand jury?
So one thing I assumed is that elected officials knew a lot more about the the business that they were transacting than they did know. Okay, as soon as I started looking at agendas, for instance, the County Board of Supervisors agenda, okay, now I understand why each supervisor does not know a huge amount of stuff. The agenda, I'm seeing them online, but I mean, if you printed them out, they would be, I don't know, 500 pages for one meeting. So no wonder they don't know everything about everything. So that I learned. Oh, and then just how many, besides, I was saying all the jurisdictions that the civil grand jury covers. Besides the cities, besides the county itself, the towns, the boards of education, but then there's all kinds of special districts. There's the plural, right? Park districts, or I don't know if they're called park districts, having to do with the environment, water districts. Wow. Yeah, just stunning. And then what is the difference between the county board of education and the, I don't know how many boards of education in every board district? Yeah. So I did learn a lot about that.
Yeah, that's I remember when I learned about special districts, and in California, I believe there's over 1,100 special districts, and like there's a cemetery special district, like anything that you can think of, and that there are government bodies that are very, very specific, that it's a continual learning process. The podcasting and learning about all these different government bodies it's very well suited to my ADHD. So I'm like always learning about different things. So as we're kind of wrapping up a little bit, why do you think others should join? And what kind of advice would you have for folks who are looking to possibly apply to join the civil grand jury?
Well, I think it's a great opportunity for anybody for people who are recently retired, who have this sense of wanting to give back to the community. And what you're going to get out of it is, like I said, I learned the way the way the whole civil grand jury does its business. It's developed over the years. It's something that works, kind of thing. There's also the excitement at the end of it when some of the reports attract the attention of the media. Me, of course, a journalism person, that's fantastic to see the things covered. So we worked this hard to report something, to find out about something, and now it's being reported in the media. That's very rewarding. But besides just retirees, I think anybody who has a flexible hours during the week would be a great contribution. And then thinking about the backgrounds of people. So I'm a journalist, or I was a journalist and teacher. Okay. So many different backgrounds, though. People from accounting, people who know about the technology, because when you get somebody who like hasn't used Microsoft in 15 years, you need somebody to train them. Brittany can't do everything. Other backgrounds, teaching, administration, human resources. There's so many different backgrounds that would come into play that would be helpful. And I'm also thinking, like, for young people, it is a lesson in civics. If a young person was taking classes online, had a bit of a flexible schedule during the week, my guideline was you should be available generally from 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, but not every single day. So of course people have appointments. People could be taking one class possibly, that has to involve them from this time to that time. You have to have a little bit of privacy because you can't have people in your house overhearing your meetings. You have to be in a private space. I had a great office. Unfortunately, my husband took it over since then. So now I'm in my dining room, but I created a very nice little office in my house, in other words, and he took it over. But anyway.
I think you covered a good amount of occupations and generationally too. I didn't think about human resources, but that's also really important, especially or anybody in like operations, because that is understanding all the different facets and how complicated the rules can be sometimes.
Yeah, and like I mentioned, accounting and finance, it's not just private companies that deal in accounting and finance. Obviously, government bodies are dealing with that all the time. People who really know how to do an Excel, that's important too. Yeah.
Understanding taxes, yeah, budgets.
Yes, yes.
Anything else you'd like to mention as we kind of close out here about maybe like how folks can, I don't know, set themselves up for success, or kind of like final thoughts on your experience and why you think it's important?
So final thoughts. I really hope to encourage young people And by young, I mean under 65, pre-retirement age people to get involved as much as possible because it's not just the life experiences and the skills, but it's just a whole different outlook on life, a whole different outlook on what government should be doing, what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. And all the diversity, not just age diversity, but the diverse communities of Santa Clara County. I would love to see them more represented to bring all those angles in that if you had like a too much of a homogeneous civil grand jury, you might not think about certain things. So just to encourage people from all different backgrounds to apply. And the other thing is you can apply and you can change your mind. You can apply and you might not be accepted this year, but you could maybe next year. You can be an alternate. So applying is not signing away your life for a year, right? Applying is what's the experience of applying like? You are interviewed by the judge. What's that like? The whole thing was very interesting.
Oh, that's a really good point. I think applying just to understand the process would be great and being interviewed by a judge because at the end of the day, it's not guaranteed it's a lottery. They're doing the lottery at the end. So you might not be selected, but you have gone through the process and it's an interesting process to go through.
And I wasn't on the original group. I was an alternate, and I think I was a month later I came on. And that was an experience in itself. So I've got over my disappointment. I'm looking for other volunteer opportunities to fill up my days. And then I got the call and are you still available? And I was. And I'm really, really glad I did it. And I might apply again. Because you can do 2 years in a row and you can leave and come back. So I served one term. I might apply and serve another term.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm glad to hear it. It's always good to have, I think, that journalism experience, especially when writing and editing, because you're usually writing for the everyday person that's reading that does not know a lot about the technicalities of local government.
And I thought when I applied that I would bring my interviewing skills, but interviewing for the civil grand jury is completely different from interviewing for journalism. So when you're interviewing for journalism, often you're seeking quotes. You're not so much seeking information a lot of the time, but you're actually seeking, is this quotable? But often the reporter already has the facts and they're looking for, how am I going to enhance this story with quotations? Yeah. Well, in the civil grand jury, you're not quoting anybody. We don't name anybody. The civil grand jury doesn't name anybody in the reports. So you're not seeking quotes. You're actually seeking information. So it's a totally different skill. But I did bring my editing skills into play because the clarity, the reports have to be very, very clear. And so that was fun.
All right, folks, that is a wrap for this episode. Join us for the next episode of Why You Should Consider Applying to Become a Civil Grand Juror, featuring Scott Duncan, another past Civil Grand Juror, and our final episode in our 5-part series. Again, make sure you check out all of the resources in our show notes. You'll find links to past Civil Grand Jury reports, where and how to apply to become a Civil Grand Juror, as well as other educational resources. Thank you so much for joining us, and make sure you give this episode a like, a share, or comment. It really does help. Until next time.